The other day, there was a great conversation that sort of spurred from Flashcast that I think is worth continuing. One has been subject to having folks comb through nitpicking unlike anything I've seen for any other comic book, especially the first issue. But that's okay. It's something that I embrace. It shows the level of interest, as I believe that many people see a lot riding on this. Ethan Van Sciver and I had a disagreement, and there's no animosity there. Men are allowed to disagree. Of course, that started from another disagreement with the third party's wrongful statements about One being maxed as excellent criticism, and I obviously consider that to be nonsensical. And as people saw that person when they were allowed to speak for themselves, I think we can all agree. But what I do feel is worth discussing is centered around the goals and intentions of this company. That's the most intriguing. And as we continued to discuss things, it became obvious that it was less about who was right or wrong and more about just having a difference in approach with our respective companies. One point brought up, for example, was one expected Avery to have something much more dramatic happen. And I do think the misunderstanding of the story of One, and a big misunderstanding, is that Avery's sister specifically sent him to basically get in these fights. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, it's more of she asked him to go talk to an old friend, and the trip to the city devolves into something else. He does this reluctantly, which of course is very typical of sort of this sibling interaction. In fact, there are two scenes in the book in which makes it pretty clear that this wasn't something that she wanted. But with that being said, if I'm not mistaken, EVS brought up an example of like Avery's niece or sister dying and those types of things being able to, I guess, what could have happened, and that being what set him off. He then used his own book as an example of that kind of a hook. Think of it this way. That makes sense for that type of story that he's telling with Cyberfrog. It's set in a more post-apocalyptic setting, and there's more immediate higher stakes. And that's where we get to the fact that there's less of a right or wrong answer on that storytelling aspect and more of a preference and goals. Number 1 is the first part of a 3-part arc. It's also not called the verse, it's called the Rippaverse. If Number 1 feels far more grounded than what's, let's say, standard nowadays, that's by design. As the lead creative and a businessman, I don't look at this company as a company with the hopes of existing for years to come. Instead, we operated from the beginning under that expectation that this would last and expand for several years. So every story and every book has to be calculated. We don't ever want to get in a position where we've wrote ourselves in a corner. On the Rippaverse Code of Ethics, you see that we talk about canon continuity and comprehensive timelines. People that value that are going to be most attracted to our company. We're not building with this idea in mind of having someone fly through one story and move on to the next property. It's being built for the customers that want to be truly invested in this company. To be completely fair, we've sent surveys to our customers, and we are very interactive, certainly on social media, because we want to get a gauge of our customer base. Even after the previous stream, I went to multiple platforms to ask readers, do they prefer set up with a more grounded experience or something uber dramatic and high stakes immediately? I'd say about 80% of the people preferred something more grounded, 10% preferred the higher stakes, and the other 10% thought both. And, I was asking more as a general setup, not like trying to combine both concepts. And that's the thing about calculation. I really want you to get to know these characters and learn about the elements of the universe. I get it. We live in this world of instant gratification. Movies give away the entire plot. And trailers, games, journals are intimidated by longer, more difficult games. Attention spans have shrunk. Perhaps some would prefer that they know all of the extent of Isam's powers, his origin story, his family tree, what kind of food he likes, and his banking information, all in the first issue of a 3-part arc. We already have at minimum 3 books, though, that are going to be released within this next year, and we will continue to speed up as we lay our foundation. And I think that this expectation is more applicable to Western media. Some of the most popular mangas, for example, will take several volumes, even hundreds, like in the case of One Piece, before you find out some very, very important things. Another example of an approach is this great question pertaining to events by one of our customers. Obviously, the bigger comic book publishers have been around longer than many of your parents and grandparents. And I doubt that any of the creators of the OG characters ever anticipated a property being that big, and their writing style is indicative of that. How could you possibly predict that this was going to be some like worldwide concept as you're like creating a Batman or a Superman or something of that nature? Now these major publishers have become heavily reliant on events, cataclysmic instances, world-breaking occurrences, massive crossovers, deaths, intergalactic planetary situations, because it's the only way that they can get some sort of hype. This is the risk that you run, especially if your plans are to put out books frequently. You know, it's difficult to top yourself when everything is on the line so early and all the time. Hell, I think this industry could use more grounded heroes and stories, and the art of the street level has been lost. As we said in our launch trailer, we want every book to mean something. You'll be able to go back 10 years from now to the ill-advised arc and still get something from it. That's who the company is made for. The customers that are in it for the long haul. We had a very fun stream the other day where I heard some of your theories, and that's what comics are about to me. It's not about being embraced by the mainstream or toppling Hollywood. It's about being a solution to problems that plague this industry in both creative and in business, which is why it's intertwined with our company. It's not about toppling Hollywood. They'll do that well enough themselves. It's certainly not about trying to follow the rules of the mainstream or impressing peers of the industry. It's not about impressing professional critics. This is for you, the customer. That's who this universe is being built for. Like I said earlier, this isn't a case of wrong or right. I think it's easy to get caught up and assume that everybody has the same exact motives, goals, and aspirations, but that's the beauty of it. There's room for everybody and the pie isn't fixed. While I personally think there will be characters and stories for your taste, if it isn't ISOM, other companies will inevitably exist. That's what I think this industry will look like in the future. Smaller successes and lesser mega corporations. And it's on those businessmen and women to identify their market and target it. But by no means do we have a monopoly on it, and you certainly don't if you are another businessman, nor is it monolithic. I personally want to thank every customer that supported this vision, and I'm glad that the vast majority of you enjoyed ISOM 1. Now ISOM 2 is going to be even better, and you can see our plans with the addition of Chuck Dixon and the Saska sisters. What I'm saying is we're just getting started. We have to be patient with our product so that we don't make errors that will come back to bite us in the future. And thanks to you all for the understanding of that, we've seen a lot of initial success. This company goes as far as the customers determine it, and we're very well aware of it.